this video, you'll be watching an excerpt from our Civil 3D Advanced class. The topic being covered is corridor intersections. So our topic that we're going to cover right now is intersections. If we look at this project, we have Arden going north to south, and we have Point West going east to west. And right here is where they overlap, but it's not a nice clean intersection. So what we're going to do is first open this up, remove the pieces of corridor that are in the intersection, and then we'll go into this slide and talk about using the intersection button and how that can help us clean it up. Okay, so first, looking at what we already have, let's click on the corridor, and you'll see there's a diamond grip at the end of Point West. Click on that diamond grip and just pull it out of the intersection. Let's give extra space. We'll just pull it all the way to here. Later on, if we need to pull it back, we can always pull it back. Okay. Then for Arden, we need to split this. Right now it's one full region. So when I select the corridor, up in the ribbon, we have split region. And we've used this before. We select the region and we get that red line. And this time it doesn't have to be very specific. I just want to give plenty of space. So I'm going to click up here to split before the intersection. And then I'll click in this region down here, use the red line again, click somewhere after that intersection. So you should see diamond grips above and below the intersection. Once it's split, we're going to delete this region. So with the corridor selected, up in the ribbon, under Modify Region, we have Delete Region. Okay, and then you're going to have to click twice. Click once to select the region, and then one more time to delete the region. So it should look like this, just some open space. So now that we have this open space, let's go to this PowerPoint slide. So in the Home tab of the ribbon, in the Create Design panel, we have the Intersections button. And what I've written here is this tool creates offset alignments and profiles around the curb returns at the intersection. It will also assign partial assemblies to your intersection. So in here, what it's going to do is it's going to create an offset alignment around this curb return, an offset alignment around this curb return. It will also create offset profiles around those curb returns. Then it will create a partial assembly that goes straight down this road, and then another partial assembly that just goes around the curve here, and another partial assembly that just goes around the curve here. And it will target the center line when it needs to target the center line. So it does a bunch of work for you. The one thing that we're going to have to fix is the assemblies that it uses are just some default assembly. It doesn't necessarily follow what we want. Like we have 20-foot lanes, 2.5-foot curb and gutter, 5-foot sidewalk, and then we have 3-to-1 daylight. It's not necessarily using our assembly. It's using some default assembly. So we'll have to go back and switch out the ones that it provided with the ones that we want it to use. Okay, so we're going to get started now. So make sure you save. So first step is just to use the intersection button, create intersection. The command line says select intersection point. So you can either use an endpoint snap or an intersection snap. You want to pick up where the two center lines touch. So right there. The problem with whenever I zoom in too far, then I can't explain anything else. So let me see if I can maybe use endpoint so I can be out a little bit. Okay, I'm going to try to click like this. I'm hoping I get the right spot. Okay. There we go. So now that I've clicked at that intersection, this window pops up and there's a whole bunch of settings that we need to check in this window. First, it has the name of the intersection. It's just calling it intersection. If you want to call it Arden and Point West, you can, but I'll go ahead and just leave it intersection. Intersection marker is just the style of the little symbol it puts here. That's fine. It has a layer. That's fine. The style is fine. The most important thing on this page is down here. We have two options: primary road crown maintained versus all crowns maintained. So if we choose all crowns maintained, you see a little preview, the crown of the road down this road and the crown of the road down this road, they meet up right at the intersection, and then the water would just drain away from these center lines, right? So it always drains down and away from the center lines. The other option is primary road crown maintained. So if you look at that preview again, it's different. This is where one road is a main road and there's high-speed traffic going down that main road, and you don't want to curve that road at all, because when you go down a main road, if it dips down, you're going to have like a big jump in your car. So you want to keep that high-speed road, that main road, just straight, following the original profile. And then maybe you have these smaller arterial streets that intersect with it. These will come down to join the low point of the main road, and then come back up to the high point and down to the low point and then out, right? So we're actually bending the profile of these crossing streets to match the shape of that main road, because you probably have a stop sign. So it's not like you're like speeding through that bump. You stop and then you slowly come back up and over. So just to demonstrate this, we're going to use this option. So primary road crown maintained. We're going to be bending the profile, and I can't zoom out right now, but we'll be bending the profile of Point West. Okay. And that is why earlier we promoted the profiles of Point West into this drawing, so that this tool has the freedom to bend the Point West profile. CAD Masters offers online and classroom training for a variety of Autodesk software. For more information, go to www.cadmasters.com or give us a call at 925-939-1378. Okay, let's click next. So here, because we have a T intersection, it knows that the one that goes through Arden Way is the main priority, and the one that comes into it, number 2, Point West, is the second priority. If both roads went all the way through, like this, if we went cross all the way through, then these arrows would be available, and you can choose which one is the main road and which one is the secondary road by using these arrows to move them up and down in this list. Okay, but again, because you have a T intersection, it knows the through street is the main priority. Now we have these 4 buttons. These 4 buttons are very important. The first 2 buttons are for the offset and curb returns. So this 2 buttons are going to help us define the offset alignments along here and along here. The second 2 buttons are for offset and curb return profiles. So it says the word profile right there. These 2 buttons are to define the offset profiles along here and along here. Okay, so let's start with that first button, offset parameters. And as you do this, you're going to see we have information for the primary road, information for the secondary road, right? As you click, it highlights which one it is. So primary road is Arden, secondary road is Point West. We have an option to create left offset alignment and a right offset alignment. And if we were using left offset and right offset alignments, the offset value for the primary road would be 20 feet, just like we did earlier, right? To get to edge of pavement, from the center line to edge of pavement is 20 feet on Arden. So do that for both of these. and tells you here Arden. So Arden, 20 feet to create that offset alignment. Secondary road, from the center line to the edge of pavement, that is 15 feet. So for point west on both left and right, that would be 15 feet. Oops. Okay. So this window is just saying, if we need an offset alignment, which represents edge of pavement, what is that offset distance from the center line? So we've done that for both roads, both left and right. Right, so we'll click OK for this window. And now we have curb return parameters. So if we had a straight road, the offset is 15 here, the offset is 20 here. But we have these curb returns, it's going around the curve. So it wants to know the radius between the two roads. So that's this one, curb return parameters. Okay. And since I was able to zoom out a bit, you can see it's highlighting which one we're talking about. It's not tracing it, but it's saying this is the one that we're working on right now. So here it's called the northeast quadrant. It's going from point west to Arden. It has a 90-degree turn. So it's grabbing all of that from the center line alignment geometry. And then the type of curb return, we have some options. We have chamfer, circular fillet, 3 centered arcs. We're using circular fillet, and the radius happens to be correct. It's 25-foot radius. Okay. So the most important thing that we're looking at here is that radius value, which is already correct. But remember, we have this curb return and that curb return. We can use the drop down at the top to move to the southeast quadrant, or we have this next and previous. So I could go previous and next. So either way, you want to make sure you check each quadrant. So I'm checking the southeast quadrant. It's a radius of 25 foot. So here, if I use this green button, it allows me to go back into my drawing. And so I guess to measure the distance for the radius, I would go from center snap of that curve to just anywhere on the curve. And that would be measuring the radius. All right, so once you double check both quadrants have a radius of 25 feet, click OK. And so that's all it needs to create the offset alignments along those curves. Next, we need offset profiles. So we need to give it some slope information. Let's click lane slope parameters. Okay, in here, it looks good. We have a 2% cross slope for all the roads, right? Left lane, right lane, Arden, Point West, all of them have the 2% cross slope. So that looks good. Click OK. And then here, curb return profile parameters. So this first button was for the cross slope here. The second button is for the cross slope here. Let's see what other parameters we need to look at. Actually, it's not even about slope, but it is about going around that curve. So it's going to follow the 2% cross slope all the way down here. And then it has to just kind of transition around that curve and then end up, well, I guess if I show it this way, it's better. It's going to come follow the 2% cross slope on this street all the way to here. And then it needs to transition around the curve to whatever this ends up being with a 2% cross slope from that street, right? So going around the curve is just actually a transition. However, we can tell it, rather than going following the profile all the way to this endpoint, we can stop a little bit short and kind of ease into this transition, right? So rather than going all the way to the endpoint, we stop a little bit short and go ease into this transition around the curve. So this is a plan view going around the curve, and this is a profile view, what it would look a slope, a constant slope going around that curve. The transition is a little bit here and a little bit here in plan view, a little bit here, a little bit here in profile view. So it's asking us, do you want to have a transition? How long should that transition be? So here we'll say, yes, we want a 25-foot transition going into the curve, and then we want another 25-foot transition going out of the curve. So it won't be so dramatic how it looks in this profile, where it's like straight up, straight down. It'll ease it into that curve more. So we're talking about profile, right? We're trying to have a more gradual slope as it goes around this curve. Does that make sense? You could change these numbers if you want the transition larger or smaller, but I'll stick with those defaults. All right. There are two quadrants, the northeast quadrant and the southeast quadrant, so make sure you check both of them. We're going to stick to the 25-foot transition. Okay. Click OK. All right, so we're done with this window. We have set up the alignment and profile parameters. We'll click next. So this is where it gets more complicated. Let's see, let me make this bigger. So up at the top, there's an option here, create corridor in the intersection area. Yes, we want that checked. Create a new corridor or add to an existing corridor. So I don't want this to be a separate corridor. I want to add the intersection to my existing corridor. My existing corridor is Arden and Point West. It will have some daylighting around the edge around here. So if we daylight, we want it to daylight to the EG surface. So that's the target. Okay. And then now these are the assemblies. So I mentioned earlier, it's going to use like one assembly that goes straight, another assembly that comes around the curve, right? And so these are the default assemblies that it will be assigning. Let's see if there's anything that we can trade out right now, because I mentioned the default assemblies don't necessarily follow our design criteria. So curb return fillet is something that is probably going to use around this curve. Primary road full section. So primary road is Arden. Full section is our original assembly. So let's switch this out right now. Click the dots or the button with the dots. Arden is the primary road, and this is the full section assembly. Click OK. Does this make sense? Question? Primary road, part section, daylight left. We're not sure about that. Primary road, part section, daylight right. Not sure about that. Secondary road, full section. So secondary road is Point West, and we do have the full assembly, the full section. So if I click the button with the dots, I can switch this one to Point West. Okay. Secondary road, half section daylight left, secondary road, half section daylight right. So these other ones, we're not quite sure what they are yet. So we're going to wait on those. Let's click create intersection. And it's going to think for a little bit. CAD Masters offers online and classroom training for a variety of Autodesk software. For more information, go to www.cadmasters.com or give us a call at 925-939-1378. So if your drawing is like mine, what you're looking at are the new offset and offset alignments. These are the offset alignments. Remember when we worked on it up here, just showed a white line. These are those white lines, those offset alignments. If I regenerate, REA, enter, now I can see the corridor intersection. Okay, so you can click on the corridor and you can use the diamond grip to slide the corridor. And for everyone, we're going to be sliding them so that they snap to the end of the intersection piece. So it should match up when you slide them in. so what I want to show you here is we had replaced, or let me show you the properties. So if I grab the corridor, right click and go to corridor properties. It's hard to show you my screen and the corridor at the same time. There you go. Okay. There's a ton of stuff in corridor properties now. We had started with Arden baseline, Point West baseline, and then we added the bus turnout baseline. Now that we've used this intersection tool, we have a bunch of intersection baselines that were added automatically. And if we look at the assembly column, we can tell which assemblies are the ones we created and which ones are the ones coming from the intersection. So Arden, shouldn't click on it, Arden, Arden right, Point West, Arden left, those obviously we created. Then we have these special ones, curb return fillet, curb return fillet. Point West is something that we created and we had switched out in that window, in the intersection window that we were working with. Arden and Arden, those are ones that we created that we had switched out in that intersection window. Where these are being used, this Point West and these Arden ones are here. So there's the main road and there's the transition using the Arden cross section. Here's the main road and here's the transition using the Point West cross section. And then same thing down here, right? There's the main road and then the transition. So the transitions have already been set to the correct assemblies and they should transition nice and smoothly. Shouldn't have any issues. But if we look closer, let me just cancel for a minute. If you look closer, this curb return area, it does not line up, right? There, all these lines are off. And that's because it's using its own default assembly. If you look at this area here, this is also kind of weird. We don't know what's going on here. It doesn't match up with our design. So there's three areas, 1, 2, 3, where it has some funky line work coming from these additional assemblies that just showed up. Okay. If I look at corridor properties, I can take note what these funny ones are, right? So there's one called curb return fillet. Every time I click, it opens. So there's, let me put this in the chat. That way we can keep track. So we have one called curb return fillet. We have it used twice. And then we have one called primary road part section daylight left. Put that in the chat. And that one is used one time. Okay. So I'm just taking a note right now. So these two look like curb return fillet. And that one looks like primary road part section daylight left. Where are these assemblies? You can see them two places. One is in tool space under assemblies. Again, you can tell the ones that I created and the ones that just randomly showed up. And then another place you can see them is in the actual model. If you zoom extents, they are typically in the upper right corner. So I zoom in here. These are the random assemblies that it generated. Okay. So let's zoom in. Let's see which ones we need to actually deal with. So this first one, I don't need. This one, primary road, part section, daylight left. I do need this one. So I'm going to put a rectangle around it. So that's one I have to deal with. This one, secondary, nope. Nope. Yes, this is another one I need to deal with. Right. Rectangle around that. Okay. So the reason why I know it's these two is because in my chat, I wrote down what we actually have in our corridor. Right. And so what I'm going to do now is kind of figure out why it picked this and how it's different from what I need in my design. Let's start with this one, curb return fillet. Actually, let's do this. Grab the whole thing, move it, just use the move command. Move it into where our other assemblies are. I'll just put it right here. And then I'll zoom into it. Okay. Curb return fillet, it has the assembly line at the edge of pavement. It has a lane on the left, and it has curb and gutter on the right. So what it's missing is it's missing the sidewalk before the daylight. It does have this daylight here, but it's missing the sidewalk, right? Do I have an assembly that looks similar to this? Not that one. Not that one. This one is pretty similar. It's missing the lane. Not that one. So since there's none of them are exactly the correct assembly, let's just grab the Point West assembly. I'm going to grab it, copy it, put it right next to this one, but I'm going to give it a new name. So this one was called curb return fillet. I'm going to call mine CRF, curb return fillet. And I want to make sure we're all caught up, but let me just give you one more step. So I copied this over. I copied Point West over. I changed the text, and I'm also going to go into the properties of the copied section here. Assembly properties. Since I copied it, it's called Point West 2. I want this to be called CRF, curb return fillet. All right. So I have copied it. I've renamed it. And I have the curb return fillet right next to it. So I need to make my copy look like the curb return fillet version. So left side, I can delete the daylight, delete the sidewalk, delete the curb and gutter. Notice how there's a lane on the left side of this assembly line. So don't delete the lane. On the right side, I don't have a lane, so I'm going to delete the right lane. However, the slope is going the wrong direction now. But that's okay. It's an easy fix. All I have to do is select that subassembly, right-click, go to subassembly properties, and on the parameters tab, where it says -2%, we're going to switch it to +2%. If you apply, you should see the slope changes. And that is all we need for that one. So curb return fillet, we'll call that good. We have one more up here that we need to work on. So if I go up top, I'm going to copy, or sorry, I'm going to move this primary road part section daylight left. I'm going to move that one down here. And it says primary road. So Arden is our primary road. I'm going to put it in this row. For curb return, it didn't matter. But for primary road, it is going to be similar to Arden. I'm going to get the original Arden, copy that, put it next to the one I'm working on. And we're going to give it a new name. I'm going to call it Arden Part Section. Such a long name. Daylight left. Right, because it was primary road part section daylight left. So Arden part section daylight left. Once you have changed the text, also we need to rename this copy. So I'm going to grab the assembly line, right click, assembly properties. Probably should zoom out so I can see that name. just changing the name. So once the name has changed, you're going to zoom in and you're going to see what we need to do to make ours look more similar to what they have here. So it looks like the right half is missing. So I'm going to delete the daylight, the sidewalk, and the curb and gutter. I'm going to keep the lanes and everything else. All right, so now that we have created our own assemblies that we need to use in that intersection, and we already saw where it looks kind of funky, right? Curb returns will be replace these, and then the daylight left one will replace this. We can just go into corridor properties. So click your corridor, right click corridor properties. In that parameters tab, assembly column, curb return fillet needs to be replaced with CRF. And then the primary road part section daylight left needs to be replaced with Arden part section daylight left. So once we're using all of our own assemblies, we can click OK, rebuild, and it should look nice and smooth, matching up with our design. All right, so on this page, these are the default ones that come with the program. If you have your own, like someone said, they have their own company assemblies, you can browse and then select your saved list of assemblies. And then that can populate this automatically. Like for right now, we are all starting from scratch, right? But now that I've done this, I can say, okay, this is actually CRF, and this is actually Arden daylight left, and this is Arden, and that is west, right? What I can do here, once I've assigned everything that I need, I can save it as a set.
Okay.
And that creates this XML file. CAD Masters offers online and classroom training for a variety of Autodesk software. For more information, go to www.cadmasters.com or give us a call at 925-939-1378.